is enough for the horse itself to be able to get over it. The horse has just towed a barge upstream, way upstream from Flatford Mill, and you can see other barges in the distance that shows what's going to happen next or where this barge will go. Now, the location's called Float Jump, which was along the towpath which Constable used to walk as a young boy on his way to school. It's also the boundary line along the River Stour between Essex and Constable's native county of Suffolk, and he's located himself and the view on the south side in Essex, looking over the river towards his beloved Suffolk. But of course he's painting this vast 6-footer in his London studio, and he skews the view. And almost symbolically, we see on the extreme right of the canvas Dedham Church. But if we were being true to nature and true to the view as it is, that church would be somewhere behind us as we stand looking at the work. But, as with the hay wain, but more extremely here, that doesn't matter. That's not what the painting's about. But the key to the painting, I think, is found in the details. We can see the water seeping through the sluice gates underneath the horse and rider. And there's a sense of almost being able to hear that water trickling and flowing through. And Constable draws our attention to that with a faintly discernible net that's put across to catch eels. But the real sound of the picture starts to emanate from the clattering of the hooves as this figure leaps over a modest gate but provides the central drama of the image. Now, Constable is knowingly art historical here. Leonardo planned a great equestrian statue. Velázquez and Van Dyck painted monumental images of noblemen and kings on great stallions. What does Constable do, though? He puts a communal garden barge boy on a barge horse. But in a way, he's saying it's just as heroic. And in the way that he flecks paint around, he gives us that sensation of actually being on the horse, but of experiencing the wind itself out of the canvas. And what he's trying to achieve here, and certainly to my mind gets very close to it, is suggesting the idea of landscape as total experience. Now, have a look at this painting. Apart from the fact that I've changed sides, you probably think something's happened to your television set, or maybe the filter on our camera's broken. But actually, this is almost the same painting as The Leaping Horse, but not quite. It's a full-size sketch that Constable made. And in fact, he's believed to have made 2 vast sketched canvases using oil. One of them was supposed to be the finished work. We now think that that didn't work for him. He dismissed it, and he turned it into this sketch, but we don't know for certain. But what we do know is that if the finished version of The Leaping Horse is landscape as total experience, this final full-size sketch is painting itself as total experience. It's a work that seems to immerse and pull you in. It's also a work whose images seem to be hewn out of human clay as much as paint. It's a painting which seems to be somewhere in the process of becoming before your eyes. And at one level, Constable arrests this dynamic, dramatic, flickering, fleeting moment, but at the same time, he suggests it by the fluid way that he slaps paint on. And this is work that seems almost, if we use the idea of the horse, to let painting off the leash. It's untethered. And that suddenly a new way of expressing some truths about the natural world are made apparent. Now, actually, I don't think Constable ever beats this sketch in the rest of his career. I think very few artists in the history of Western art get to this level of intensity and passion. Plenty of people have done sketchy works, but this has a real gravitas, monumentality, grandeur and passion to it. And it throws down a gauntlet that is picked up by the French Impressionists and Expressionists throughout the 20th century.
His wife Maria developed tuberculosis, and she and the children moved to Brighton in 1824, hoping that the sea air would improve her health. Constable made frequent trips between London and Brighton and began making studies of the sea. Although he didn't like the town and its people, Constable was inspired by the dramatic and changeable weather. This painting, The Chain Pier, was another 6-footer and the first depicting a landscape outside Suffolk. The work itself was attacked by the London Magazine and didn't find a buyer until Constable's studio auction after his death. The choppy, turbulent seas and dark clouds are often seen as a reflection of Constable's concern for his wife's ill health. Maria Constable's health improved enough for her to give birth to their 7th child at the beginning of 1828, but by the summer she was very ill, and in November she died. Constable was absolutely devastated. "The face of the world is changed to me," he said. 14 years before, when he was head over heels with Maria just before they got married, he'd come here on a sketching trip to Hadley Castle, an old medieval ruin with spectacular views out across the Thames estuary to sea. And it was that image of an isolated, decaying ruin that seemed to have struck a chord in his visual memory, and which prompted him, at the end of 1828, to begin one of the most powerful and moving paintings of his entire life. Constable's mood and work varied, but he himself said it was no surprise that he painted raging storms. And the painting that he thought would be considered his greatest shows his old muse, Salisbury Cathedral, almost enveloped by dark, swollen clouds. This time, though, it was politics. Constable, the Conservative, was aghast at the ongoing debate about the Reform Bill of 1832, which expanded urban constituencies and reduced rural ones. And Constable commented that this was an attack on the Constitution of England, which would, quote, only give the government into the hands of the rabble and dregs of the people. And so for Constable, in effect, England itself was under a cloud. But the painting has a redemptive quality. The rainbow is a biblical symbol of God's peace with mankind after the flood. And here, after railing against the injustice of his wife's death, Constable seems to be making his own peace with the world. Constable's late work tends towards abstraction and was highly influential. The French Impressionists, for one, picked up on the idea that landscape could be a vehicle for avant-garde experiment. John Constable died on the 31st of March 1837, feeling that his work had not gained the recognition it deserved. Ultimately, he emerges as a paradoxical figure, a conservative man, but a radical artist, whose work flew in the face of tradition rather than reinforcing it.